Hi there. This is Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. I heard Derek Gilbert announce today was Cinco de Mayo, but that's tomorrow. Today is actually the 4th. It is Tuesday, right? Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure. So today, let me see if I can. Some of the news that I hear, and I don't know. It's so hard to know which of this stuff is legitimate, true. It's some things just get to be so incredibly horrifying. Like yesterday, not only are they saying underground they're finding kids in cages, but that the cages are electrified so they don't dare touch the cage to try and escape. I mean, the news about some of what is going on just seems to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's so mind-boggling. I mean, is there going to be a disclosure next month in June about UFOs? Trump promised at the beginning of August that he wants everything disclosed. Our underground tunnels and underground bases and all this stuff, the legitimacy of it. And I was hearing somebody, I can't remember who it was, talking this morning about the IRS and the Federal Reserve are functioning from an underground location. Did our men actually go to the moon or not? Is there a satellite colony on Mars, which I've heard people talking about? Is JFK Jr. still alive with his wife? I guess we're supposedly, if we'll find that out by the end of the week. There's talk that Trump's going to be back July 4th. There's talk that he will be back by the end of August. I don't know what to think about all that. So I tend not to talk about that. And I did learn from Larry that if you start talking about the people who hurt boys and girls and women, young or older, to talk about such things because of who's involved in it puts life so much in danger that Larry wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't even talk about what he knew. And he realized things were way worse than he realized. Then he would admit he didn't want to know the details. And thank God for what we hear that Trump is trying to do. And it makes me wonder how much information about it he got from Larry. I know Larry told him more than he could ever tell any of us. So, when I think of Trump coming back, when I think of the announcements that we hope he will make, I want to say to you guys again, Larry was able to do what he did because of us. And if it weren't for what we did for him, he would not have been able to do what he did. And when I took $1,000 over in cash to him that somebody was donating by check on Monday, I got it the following Monday. And I just, took the money myself just to make sure he had the money to get through the weekend that he had asked for. I mean, he was scrunched way down like this with his phone, with his cell phone. He looked over when I came in the door, he looked over his shoulder. Rosie the dog was, indicating that somebody was at the door. So he just looked over his shoulder, and I showed the money, and I was just going to leave it on the table right inside the door and leave. And he looked at me, and so our eyes met, and he went straight back to he was all scrunched in the corner of the chair, really shrunk down. I couldn't hear a word that he was saying. He was talking very, very softly. And his wife came down the hall and took the money from me. And I would assume she was down the hall because he was working and needed privacy for his conversation. So, I think it was incredible that less than 48 hours before he died, he was still, and I'm sure he did this again on Saturday, because I didn't hear from him on Saturday before he died. And I'm sure that he was trying to wrap up as much as he could. Now, he did plan to be back the following week, but his health just took a turn, and he couldn't get, when he tried to go to the hospital on that Saturday for medical treatment, he thought he needed $1,000, and they said 2,000, and he didn't call me to ask for another 1,000 that I knew was coming in and had actually pulled out of the bank just in case. And so, what can I say? So it dawned on me last night when I was thinking about that last $1,000 I took over and handed to his wife. She came to the door and she let me know that Larry had died. Well, I had already given her the money, an additional $1,000. Or no, I know what was happening is I told her it was coming in the mail. It dawned on me that I was thinking we had given $500 to help pay for his funeral, because I had taken $500 that we had collected and had taken that. It was $500 plus the flowers. I had taken that $500 straight to the funeral home and put it on his bill. Yes, Morgan, even when he was in the hospital, he'd hide in the bathroom to be able to make a phone call. So it dawned on me that extra money that came in had helped to pay for his funeral, because it couldn't go toward meds anymore. And so we covered, I don't know how much. I do know now there's somebody has verified for me that he was cremated. I don't know what that costs. I know we paid for the rental of the room for the service. I know we did that, and we provided an incredibly beautiful bouquet that I showed you guys. And then that extra $1,000 would have gone towards his cremation. And I don't know where his remains are. I don't know how to find that out. Anyhow, I was thinking today, somebody had posted something a while back about Larry and had made a comment that I noticed, and it just got me thinking about all that again, because I had commented out February 26, 2018, he died, and we had prayed him back to life, and the Lord allowed him to come back. And, he worked for another 2.5 years. And he was working right up to the very last minute. And that kind of tenacity impresses me. I don't know if I could do that. I'm struggling as it is with what I'm doing, Anyhow, I heard somebody talking this morning about what's happened in Windham, New Hampshire. The city itself decided they were going to audit their election results. And they found 300 additional votes for Trump. And there was 100, and I did something having to do with 100 votes. And it was whether they found another 100 for Biden, or they found 100 that had been given to Biden that needed to go to Trump. I didn't quite catch what that was. But it's the people want a real legitimate audit, like they're doing in Maricopa County, Arizona. And the city board. Oh, I know where I was hearing this. It was somebody who was involved in this in New Hampshire on Coach Dave Live this morning. That's where I heard it. The city board wants to choose who will do the audit, and of course, being Democrats, they want somebody who will slide everything under the table. They want one of the top people who know how to do this, and the people voted for who they wanted, and the board refused to allow it. So they're still in a fight with them. The board's refusing the people's choice. So what this woman said, who was very involved in this process for, a True the Vote situation, she said, build a team and get the audit done on your own. There are ways that you can do that. So I'm not sure what that is because they didn't give a website to tell, but she said there are public records available that tell who is registered to vote. You can get the voter registration information. There, ballots are nameless, so you can't verify that. But anyhow, she said there is a way to do that. So if you suspect you're in an area that you question the vote, get some other people together and go after it. Patrick Byrne today said, and he's the one that used to own Overstock and is very involved. He was at the Health and Freedom conference in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a couple weekends ago. He said there's absolute proof of vote switching by foreign nations. They know which province precincts it happened in, and they have the IP addresses of the computers that did it. I don't know if you guys have heard with the Arizona audit, there is a Phoenix police plane circling above. Now, the question is, are they circling? This was my first question. Are they circling in order to protect the people inside? Or are they circling because their spy equipment enables them to get information off everybody's cell phones? So are they spying so that they can harass the people involved in the audit? Or are they there to protect? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I did hear that the Democrats have sent in spies to watch what's happening and, probably to try and interrupt it from the inside. That's a speculation on my part. I don't have a way to verify that. Jim Baker had a guest today, Marianne Peluso McGann, who said, this was interesting what she had to say. She was talking about the church and the message of God's grace that has permeated so widely in talking about God's love. And that bothers me that people talk about God's love and ignore his holiness. She said, they're preaching a message of forgiveness without repentance, blessing without obedience, grace without growth. In other words, grace, all you need is your ticket to heaven, and then you can do whatever you want. That's a lie. Revival without repentance, spirituality without conviction or sacrifice, prosperity without having proper priorities. To use your money wisely, God said he doesn't give us money so that we can just spend it on ourselves. We're supposed to take care of the needs of others. And then there was one other piece of news that I had. I was transitioning to the Bible time, but I forgot one other piece of news. I saw Larry Kudlow talking, and he was talking about Biden's speech to Congress and the $6 trillion of new spending, the $4 trillion in new taxes in Biden's plan, the Green New Deal that we know is anything but helpful. It's just a way of raising taxes. Biden claimed that they're not going to raise taxes for people making under $400,000 a year, but gas taxes going up. There are all kinds of other ways that they can tax, and those taxes are more likely to affect all of us than even the wealthy. Many of those taxes we have to pay more than what they would pay. So I'll tell you, watching people lie, say one thing out of one side of their mouth, and that there's no truth whatsoever in what they're doing is really, it's a little hard to take. Anyhow, Christ is coming back, and it seems in a way it's not soon enough. On the other hand, for the sake of those that have not yet received Christ and are not following him, For their sake, I ask for God's mercy to delay a little longer, and we need to be speaking up and trying to help lead others to Christ. So I was reading in Mark again this morning. I mean, my walk through the Bible has just ground a halt. Anyhow, I was reading in Mark 8 today, and I thought this was interesting. It's the disciple. They had fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves and a few fish, and this was after he had fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And they had leftovers, of course. So they get in the boat, and the disciples had forgotten to take bread with them and didn't have more than 1 loaf left in the boat with them. Jesus was giving them orders and saying, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Now we know leaven is what spreads and raises, and so the Pharisees are very outspoken, and so the things that they're doing is going to affect other people because they're leaders. He's just giving them a warning not to follow what some people would call a false prophet. Now they're not prophets or Pharisees. They were the leaders. So we have to be careful about the leadership that we follow. So the disciples began to discuss one another that they had forgotten to grab any more bread. Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Don't you yet comprehend or understand? Do you still have your heart hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? Don't you remember and then he talks about the people they had fed, how much it had taken. So Jesus is saying to them, hey, pay attention. We just fed 4,000 people off 7 loaves of bread. 4,000 people, 7 loaves of bread. And now you're worried that we only have 1 loaf of bread among the 13 of us on the boat? Come on now. What are you not understanding? And, because Larry's teaching is still so fresh in my mind, I just think about all he had done all those years since the 90s to be on the air all over the place, telling people about the Clintons, telling people about if they get to Washington, what's coming, which of course it did, telling people that we are headed into communism. He knew what Khrushchev had said. He knew the socialist agenda. He knew what Saul Alinsky had said. All he had to ever do was read it once, and it never left his mind. And so, it's just like the time that he was working with a bunch of lawyers, I think, to help Kavanaugh get through the hearings. And he remembered a law from back in the 1800s, Civil War time. And they couldn't find it. It was a ruling that had been made as a result of some court case. And they couldn't find it. Of course, they're looking on Google, young people, they're using the internet to search. And I don't know, it was days, if not a couple weeks, they argued with Larry. And he finally blew up at him. We heard his temper every once in a while. He finally blew up at him and said, get to the Library of Congress and find it. And then, he felt bad about yelling at him, but he called me afterwards and he said, Mary Ellen, I wouldn't know that law existed if I hadn't read it once sometime, somewhere, somehow. He said, if I remember it, it exists because of his photographic memory. And it just makes me think of how hard he worked to get his message across. That we would be involved, not just listen to him, not just show up to hear him as a great storyteller, which he was, an incredible storyteller. Which reminds me of Jesus saying that, he taught the people because they were coming for entertainment. They wanted the entertainment. They wanted to see the people healed. They wanted to be entertained by that. They wanted to hear his wonderful stories. He said, I speak in parables because they're too blind to be able to understand. And even his disciples around him had a hard time understanding. And, I know how frustrated Larry would get at people were coming and going and coming and going. They'd follow him for a while. They'd leave. They would be on the call for a little bit. They'd go away. He had such incredible things to teach. And, here's Jesus saying, don't you get it? I just heard Larry so many times say, don't you get it? Don't you get it? Don't you get it? And that just leaves me thinking, we have got to remember the things that Jesus taught us. We also have to remember the things that Larry taught us, and we need to be doing them. And here I am spending my day packing, not knowing where I'm going. And I was thinking again this morning, I haven't picked up the phone once since I told you guys that I think it's important for us to make at least one phone call a day to talk to somebody about what's going on in our country. If that's the minimum we do, at least do that one minimum. Anyhow, I was rebuked. And then when I read this about, how hard, we're just so thick-skulled. Comfort is so important to us that we forget what people are suffering around the world. We forget what our brothers and sisters and missionaries are suffering. We fail to be involved. This is our government. We should be involved. And, when I came in, the first thing I did was try, because Larry's in the hospital and not available to talk. So, one of the first things I did when I got here was try to find out how the city government worked so that I could get involved. Well, I just got rebuffed left, right, and center. And, everybody was doing everything online because of COVID, and all the meetings were closed. You couldn't get in on them. And it's like, or they were closed, or if they weren't closed, they weren't giving out any information. And so I've just ignored all of that. And it's been weird to have been here for now 13 months. And tomorrow will be 13 months since I got here. And to realize how uninvolved I am, and what little effort I have made to get involved. Now, the masks were a big bugaboo, but the mask mandate has been lifted in Arkansas, although local government and businesses are allowed to make their own decision on that, which is why you still see so many people. They still have all the signs on the doors, but they don't stop you anymore if you come in without one, usually. So, it was a reminder to me. I don't want to be somebody who walks around blind. Larry talked about being alert. Pay attention. Pay attention to your surroundings. So you're watching in a parking lot, what's around you. Just the basics of common sense, All right. So just a little bit on continuing our walk through the Bible. We're still in I'm going to talk today about the last 3 books of history, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. These 3 books are very strongly tied in with the captivity. And maybe I'll start with Esther and then go back to Ezra and Nehemiah. So Esther means Star of the East. This book is one of the books that's never mentioned or quoted in the New Testament. The word God, Yahweh, Jehovah, this word is not mentioned in the Bible, and yet we know God is very much involved in what happened because God cares for his people. It teaches the reality of God's divine providence. And then there's a comparison here. When you think of Ruth, she was a Gentile who married a Jew, Boaz a Jew. Esther is a Jew who married a Gentile, King Ahasuerus. And there was a long time when people didn't think Esther belonged in the Bible because they did not recognize King Ahasuerus as one of the kings of Persia. And yet archaeology has found his name. And I get pretty excited every time, and I don't hear this very often, but I get excited when I hear one more find. They found one more thing in the Middle East that confirms what's in the Bible. I think that's pretty special. Oh, and then Mordecai was her cousin. Her parents had died, and Mordecai was quite a bit older than her, and ended up raising her and helped her to become one of the ones that when King Ahasuerus got rid of Vashti, it was a big party time, and Ahasuerus had the men around, and the Queen Vashti was having her own party with the women. Well, the king got drunk and wanted her to come dance and parade in front of everybody and show off her beauty. Well, she didn't want to leave her women in her party, and so she refused to come. And so he got mad. He asked the men at the party what should he do. Chauvinists that they were, they said, well, you can't allow your wife to stand up to you like that, or our wives will stand up to us, and we won't be able to control everybody and rule. I mean, talk about the way look how many centuries this has been the tradition. So he had her, I don't remember if he had her killed or banished. I think he had her banished and had to find a new wife. And so they paraded all these beautiful women in front of him, and she won. He married her. And the story goes that Haman was very jealous. He was a high up, and he was jealous of some things that were going on, and he wanted to get rid of the Jews. And so he tricked the king into signing an edict that they were going to slaughter all the Jews. And the law of the Medes and Persians can never be changed. And so that became a problem. And so Esther had a dinner with the king. And Mordecai came and told her that they were going to slaughter all the Jews, and said, look, how do you know? She goes, I haven't seen him in a long time. He hasn't called for me. I can't go into his presence without being killed for daring to do that unless he holds out his scepter to me. And Mordecai said, how do you know but what you were raised for such a time as this, to save the people? You've got to try. So she had everybody around her fast for 3 days, and she tell the Jews to fast for 3 days because they were freaking out that they were going to be slaughtered. So they fasted for 3 days, and then she went into the palace, and he was sitting on his throne, and he held out the scepter to her, and she invited him to dinner, and then invited him to dinner again. He and Haman were the only ones going. And in the meantime, the king couldn't sleep one night, and so he told them to bring the record of deeds to him, thinking that he would get bored and sleep. And they told about how Mordecai had overheard a plot to kill the king, and he says, well, what's been done to honor him? And they said nothing. And so the next day, Haman came to see him before this dinner, and he said, Haman, I have somebody I want to honor because they've done something really special. What should we do? So Haman says, put your royal robe on, put your seal on his finger, put him on your best horse, and have him parade through town, telling everybody to bow down to him because you want to honor him. And so the king says, go do this to Mordecai. And he hated Mordecai. So he has to do this and honor Mordecai, which made him livid, which is probably part of what led to the edict against, killing all the Jews, because he knew Mordecai was a Jew. He wasn't going to just take Mordecai. I was going to take them all out. And by taking them all out, he would get Mordecai. But they didn't know that the queen was a Jew, and Queen Esther. So when the queen has them for dinner, the second day, he tells about the edict and reveals that she's a Jew. And so, the king leaves to go ponder what's going on because he can't change the rules. And Haman is there begging at her feet. And the king walks in and sees Esther begging, touching the queen. That infuriated the king. And so the gallows that Haman had built to hang Mordecai was used to hang him and Haman's family. So this is about God's divine providence. And then because he couldn't undo the law to have the Jews slaughtered, what he did, the day was set, what he did is he told them that they were allowed to fight back. And apparently that was enough to scare people off from coming after him. So we know that the king of Persia at one point was King Cyrus. And under Cyrus, the Jews were allowed to go back to the homeland. This is 70 years after they had come into the tribe of Judah, had gone into captivity. And Jeremiah had prophesied that after 70 years, they'd go back. Now, last year, we read through Daniel's prayer, reminding God, hey, you said that after 70 years, we'd go back. Time's up. We're at 70 years now. But we realize we've sinned. We have not continued to follow you. And he just went on this huge prayer of repentance on behalf of the people. So the people go back, and Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer, and he came in with a sad face, which he normally didn't have. And the king said, "What's going on?" And he says, how can I smile when my homeland is in ruins? And so he got permission to go. And so the book of Nehemiah is about what happened when the people went back. It's the last historical book. It deals with the rebuilding of the wall around Jerusalem. And they did it in only 52 days, but there were people who tried to stop the building and were running like tattletales to the king. The king had given them all kinds of material and guards and so on. Oh, that's right. It says after Nehemiah, it says here in this list, after the book of Nehemiah, there's no inspired record of Jewish history for the next 400 years until the angel Gabriel broke the silence in announcing the coming birth of John the Baptist. That's because, David, who was king, had written the book of Psalms. Solomon wrote Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. And then all the other books are prophets, and those prophets all lived during the times of the kings. So Nehemiah is the last book written in the Old Testament. It's not the last book of the Old Testament, but it was the last one written. And then Ezra was a scribe. So he records the return of the Jews from captivity. Now, Ezra, in chronological order, after the books of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, which is talking about the kings, then we've got Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. So Ezra was a scribe, so he's recording what happened. He also records what happened in Zerubbabel's rebuilding of the temple. He records God's faithfulness in reestablishing the Jews in Israel. Israel is the only country in world history that has completely lost their land. The people have been taken away. There were no, basically, there was no Jewish government left in Israel. And yet they have come back not once, but twice. So in the time of Nehemiah and Ezra, and then again, just 50 years ago. Next week, it'll be 50 years at the end of next week. He talks about King Cyrus, King Darius, King Ahasuerus, who was the king that Esther married, and then King Artaxerxes. There were only about 50,000 Jews that returned to Israel. Zerubbabel was a priest who organized the return, and welcome, George, and ended up rebuilding the temple, and the people were just heartbroken. They wanted to rejoice over having a temple again, but some of them had either seen Solomon's temple or at least had heard stories of it. And so I think there were a few older people after 70 years who did go back, and as a child had seen the temple and come into captivity, and coming back, they wept because, the younger people were excited to have a temple to worship God, but the older ones knew what a difference it was. The prophets Haggai and Zechariah motivated the people to rebuild the temple. And Ezra, being a priest, was a descendant of Aaron. And 50,000 had come back with Nehemiah, and about 1,500 came back then with Ezra. And so that's the end of the books of history. I guess next week, no, tomorrow's Wednesday. Tomorrow, not next week. I'm thinking today's Friday. Good grief. Tomorrow we'll do the 5 books of poetry, which is Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. So that's it for today. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Pray for Laura. We got 2 personal prayer requests today. Laura needs to move. I need to move. I need to find a house that I can buy and stop paying rent. And I'm absolutely appalled at what has happened to home prices, not knowing where I'm supposed to go, because I was waiting through the winter for weather to clear up, and investigating Texas didn't work out. And so now I'm stuck. Am I not stuck? Am I staying here? Am I moving to Tennessee? Am I staying in this town? Am I moving elsewhere in this state? I am not hearing from the Lord on that. And you better believe I've been just seeking the Lord. This morning, I spent time in the Word. I spent time in prayer. I was listening to some, encouraging things. And as I was packing, my stomach just started getting really, really, really nervous, even though I was fasting again this morning. It's like, I don't know where I'm going, but, I had to just remind myself, it was 2 weeks before moving day, 2 weeks before closing, that the Lord told me I was definitely coming to Conway. So I don't need to know yet, but if I'm going to buy something, I kind of need, I'm going to pay cash. And so I can do something quickly, but I don't know if I can find some place where the buyer's willing to do something quickly. Something I need to look at is sometimes I'm looking at a house that's empty. I need to remember that, because there might be more flexibility. But I'm finding that the houses that are over my budget are teeny tiny, or built 1945, 1950s old. And, those older homes come with a bunch of repairs that I won't have money to do. So I'm kind of stumped. Yes, home prices they seem outrageous. And then you've got some people saying that the transition of people is not going to let up. And so if you're going to a red state, the prices will keep going up. And give me 1 minute. I'll be right with you. And then you got JP Morgan saying a crash is imminent. So which is correct? I don't know. Are they going to keep going up, or are they coming down? I don't know. Larry told me to wait because he thought they were coming down, and all it's done is gone up. So God's got this. So I'm doing my best to not sweat it, not be in fear, and just hang in there. So Have peace tonight, like I'm going to strive for. God bless you. We'll talk tomorrow afternoon. Bye bye.